These are for you guys whenever you want to put them on. And that doesn't go to the room, it just goes to the live stream.
And I met a couple people just...
Which is already going.
Okay, cool. I met these people can hear. I met a couple people the other day. Hi, Lori, come on through. No, you're all good. No, it's all right. I met some people out on Sea Watch, and they had watched the pelagic panel in preparation for their pelagic trip, and they were from San Diego. And I was like, oh, like,
that's so amazing.
How'd you find that? So random.
How did they find it?
Oh, I didn't ask them how they found it. We were just talking about pelagics, but yeah, it was just kind of funny. I was like, oh. Yeah, we were using the microphones that night, and you were like, oh, this is working, but it was on mine at least. We had that.
Yeah, it's only for the live.
Hey, welcome. Come on through. You're not late. Don't worry.
That works well here.
I guess I'll sit over here while she's.
Hello to everybody.
Yeah.
I have my computer open in case somebody submits questions.
Yeah. You could start doing your intro maybe.
When I go live.
Now you're live, yeah. I should have that like on my phone. Ready. Oh, do you want the microphone for your intro? Okay.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? I see a lot of familiar faces here and some new faces. That's awesome. I'm Shannon Simpson, Executive Director for Monterey Audubon Society, and we're thrilled to have you all here tonight. We have a great presentation in store for you with Amanda's going to open us up quickly and talk a little bit about the basics of eBird and then open it up to questions with Brian. We are live on YouTube right now as well, so hello to anybody who's out there. These little mics are for our live stream. And I am really excited to see what we all have in store tonight. Just a little plug, Monterey County Gives starts on Thursday, and we all know that Monterey Audubon Society is your favorite charity if you're here. So make sure you pay attention to that when it opens on Thursday. But yeah, I'll turn it on over to Amanda, who will get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining tonight. Yes, my name is Amanda Priest. I'm the chair of the Conservation Committee, and it's my great honor to be doing this very short brief before we get to Brian doing the Q&A, because he's the pro on all this stuff. But I kind of wanted, just in case anybody was here and their question was going to be, what is eBird? I was going to do a little very cursory overview, because I know, some folks really get into birds because they like photography or drawing, and then they maybe come to it a little bit later for the listing side of things. So, there's no right or wrong way to go about observing birds. They're just alive out there doing their birdie thing, and we get to look at them. Like, lucky us. Like, look, so eBird.org It's a website, and every time you open it, every day there's a different bird. Patagonian tinamou. I've never seen one, and a tinamou is a really ancient group of birds. Then you can look down here. Anytime you are on a website and there's a little hand that pops up like that, it means it's a link. So you can click it, and then it'll show you more pictures of Patagonian tinamous. Tinamotus, I don't know, Ingafi. There's a range map, so it looks like they're way down in Argentina. You can look at the weekly bar chart for Monterey County would likely just be 0, of course, all the way across. So it is. We're kind of diving in, obviously, but yeah, eBird.org, you can dive in and get really deep into the weeds quickly. If you had one goal to submit a checklist you found in your archives from long ago, you might just get distracted and be doing this all day, looking at cool bird pictures. Oh, so it's not every day. It's random every time you open it. So now we have a Vanikoro island thrush. So this is my profile page on eBird. You can all see my small species observed. I need to get clear 500 here. But this is, One more. I know who's going to be the 500th. I don't know. But this is such a powerful tool. I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I learned about eBird maybe in 2007 when I was taking ornithology. And back then it was just the desktop version. You had to go to eBird.org and you maybe had your paper notes in the field and then you submit them via your computer. And it was super powerful, and the idea behind it's still very special, and it's the largest, biodiversity database on the planet. Like, iNaturalist looks at everything, but the birders are a powerful force on this planet, and our desire to keep lists, and maybe to some extent there's an element of competition that gets a little bit baked in when you get these like leaders. Who's the country with the most checklists, species leaders, and then when you narrow down to a county or something, you'll have your local county checklist leaders or species leaders. That's a good question. A lot of folks I wager nowadays, that movie, The Big Year, is what this guy's probably referring to, right? People will do a big year where they're going to try to see as many birds, maybe in the American Birding Association area, the ABA area, or North America. Some people might do it for the county, Monterey County Big Year. And eBird would be an amazing and very useful tool to keep track of your birds. But just through our innate nature of keeping lists and wanting to document things and maybe the friendly competition, we're providing the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. That's this logo in the top right here. That's the logo for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology over in Ithaca, New York, that does all this amazing work. And not only do we have this website, there's an app now. So if you have eBird, the app, it makes it even easier to submit checklists when you're out birding. And these things are all just provided like for free to us, the birding community, the scientists who want to pull data from eBird. So it's really special. It's a really cool tool. And something that came out more recently that people might be familiar with is the Merlin Bird ID app. I know, woohoo! People are cheering. People love it. And this is the feature they have at the top now, because the bird identification, the sound ID, is really amazing. I was able to learn bird songs and calls so much more quickly now than ever in the past. Some of you might be like musicians and you have the ear for it, but I certainly am not. And that really helped me like quickly learn bird songs and calls. But yeah, they have the photo ID function and the step-by-step bird ID wizard. But in Merlin, it's super cool. It kind of gets people, the step in the door maybe. You might get a little intimidated by all the big field guides or all the birders in their khaki and stuff. And you're like, oh, but Merlin's going to be that like kind of gateway, maybe getting into birding or nature watching or getting out and observing creatures in your community. So it's really a critical and really cool tool now that we get to utilize. What else does I say about that? Oh, again, free. And the reason it's so darn accurate is because of eBird. These two things are so intricately linked. When you submit information into eBird, it makes Merlin better at what it's going to offer you when it has, it's hearing a song. It makes that cool little sonogram, the shape of the sound. It's going to be looking with computer vision software in the big database of all the different audio samples that birders have submitted to eBird to find what matches up and what's the likelihood of finding these birds in your area. And that's how it gets accuracy so well. eBird's free. eBird is free. Merlin is free. We're so spoiled. Again, the democratization of bird knowledge has just altered the landscape for us birders, opened it to a whole new suite of people, and made it just so much more just easy to engage with. My other tab open on the computer here, this is a cool new thing. This one's not free actually, but it's an amazing resource, the Birds of the World database. This formerly used to be Birds of North America. If any of you guys remember that, they used to have like print things. I remember at some of my old jobs, they'd have like D-ring binders of all these natural history, just like accounts for different North American bird species that I'd be interfacing with, and they were printed from Birds of North America, but just in the last couple of years, Cornell Lab of Ornithology has created Birds of the World. And this is more not for identifying birds, but for, we can do surprise me just because that's a fun one. Oh boy, there's not a picture for it yet? Oh, it's still loading. There are lots of birds on this planet, you guys, about 11,000 species. Oh my gosh, so this is maybe, it's a least concerned species, but it must be in a place that's not birded very often, because look at this picture.
Scroll down a little bit. Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness, so look here, it's right on this, where even are we? Is this
Philippines.
Indonesia?
Philippines.
The Philippines, thank you, Brian. So this is, so you can get this information about the 11,000 bird species on the planet, and it's all the like peer-reviewed journal information available for this species. Everything that's known scientifically about any of the 11,000 bird species, you can find through this website. So it's the place I always go to if like, I need to read up on surf scoters. What's up with surf scoters? I keep talking about them nonstop. You can go to the surf scoter page. Look at that guy. You get all the beautiful pictures from the Macaulay Library. Most of these submitted probably through eBird. And then you have all these accounts here on the side. Just, we're always thinking about movements and migration. What they're doing with their migration. And here's all, and the references, here's the paper, the status of sea ducks in the North Pacific. And you can go and then look that up. So if this is what I recommend to like the graduate students who are like, I want to learn more. Hey, come on in, no problem. So this is a really amazing resource. And again, a lot of the range maps, a lot of the imagery and audio that's in these accounts is being pulled from eBird. So again, that's that kind of nexus of the bird knowledge in the world. Again, an amazing resource. One last thing related to eBird. This is another page I rely on a lot. eBird status and trends. This is a newer publication or a new website that's gone live here. It's not for all species in North America. Like they still don't have a good one, I think, for Pacific loon, at least for trends. So this eBird's really powerful at looking at trends over time. It can't tell you like how many Pacific loons are in Monterey Bay right now. Like we all wish we knew, but the trends over time is what is really powerful about eBird. So again, these status and trends data are being aggregated from eBird checklists that all of the birders of the world are contributing to. There is a really high QA component to eBird. So if I said, I saw a Chilean flamingo, haha, like, oh, no, like you will get called out very quickly. Is there a picture of that Chilean flamingo? How did you ID this Chilean flamingo? So that's how eBird gets to be so quickly and readily pulled and used to just study birds almost in real time across this planet. Hey, come on in. Don't worry, you're not interrupting. So anyways, all three or these four websites are like my most clicked, most viewed websites that I use. And so that's just kind of, the Merlin and the status and trends both are just fed by eBird. And so again, that's just such a powerful tool to utilize. If any of you are just starting out, there's a lot of really good like tutorials on YouTube on like how to use eBird or things like that. We'll go over obviously Q&A tonight. That's the goal of tonight, but there's lots of good resources online as well to learn about how to use it. Yeah. Oh yeah, actually, that's going to be a good question for Brian because I'm not sure I know that. I've always been concerned that Merlin is not like going to be as accurate when I am in San Jose Creek Natural Preserve because I don't get a cell phone signal there. Good, that is going to be a perfect question for Brian to answer. In which case, I might go ahead and say, Brian, why don't you come up here and take a seat or stand or
right,
do you want to click in?
Yeah.
Okay,
why
cool.
not?
There you go.
Let's see if this works.
Brian Sullivan, everybody, works for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. There you go. And
Let me see.
HDMI in.
Yeah. Wrong side.
Okay, cool. Whew. And also, Brian, when did you start working for Cornell?
I started in 2005.
Oh, yeah.
So eBird was about
starting up.
3 years old
Yeah.
at the time.
That's amazing.
And let's see. Hang on one sec.
This is always the tricky bit. Which part of the screen will you see? Yeah, so the eBird, the website was developed first, of course. The app maybe just came around, I don't know, in the last 10 years or so. And then the Merlin app's really pretty new. I think the last 4 or 5 is maybe when we all maybe started grabbing onto that. And And then the sound ID function was added a little bit later to Merlin, and that's when I was like, I started using that like very, very often. So yeah, it's been a really amazing evolution. And Brian is an ornithologist and bird person. Obviously, there's a bunch of like data programmer people who are actually building this stuff, right? Not a software engineer.
Yeah. So
carry on.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
It's amazing to be here. It's amazing to be here and have someone else actually give an overview of eBird and all these tools. I think it's the first time that's ever happened.
Oh, good.
So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
It's pretty amazing to see what's happened with this project and this suite of tools in the last 20 or so years. I've got a couple of slides to show. I apologize for the Chinese. I just got back from China giving this presentation, so I just pulled these slides as a subset of that. But one of the things I want to talk about at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, we've kind of come to this realization in the last 20 years or so of working on this stuff, that this simple equation seems to work really, really well. And it's if we build the right tools that are capable of engaging lots and lots of people, we can use the data that they submit for actual scientific research and achieve conservation at scale. So the tools I'm going to talk about tonight are eBird, Merlin, Birds of the World, as already mentioned, and then the Macaulay Library is a fourth kind of element that I don't want to just gloss over because it's a really important tool. So this is sort of the world according to eBird, and you can see the date down in the lower left. And what you're seeing on this map are data points. So every point of light on this map is a checklist submitted to eBird. So over time, you can see the data build up. And as Amanda said, eBird has now more than 2 billion bird observations in its database, and it's responsible for about 50% of all of the cataloged biodiversity data on the planet. So in these big repositories that gather and store information on all life, eBird accounts for about 50% of that. And what's interesting about this map is you can see the really bright spots are places where we have a lot of data, and the dark spots are places where data are pretty sparse. So the thing that we're focused on right now is not only amplifying the bright spots and trying to get those, brighter and brighter, but trying to figure out ways to fill in the dark areas. And those dark areas may require different kinds of techniques. So we're thinking now a lot about automated recording units. So you can think about Merlin Bird ID. You're essentially running an automated recording unit in your iPhone when you're listening to birds. So how can we deploy sensors into these dark places where we're not getting data now, pull those data up to a cloud, process it, pull it together with the data that you see here to make a bigger and more complete picture of what's happening with birds. And really what we're trying to do at the lab is measure the heartbeat of the planet weekly through bird populations. And we're doing that because birds are everywhere. There's a lot of people out there looking at them. They're relatively easy to identify, see. All these things make birds an incredible set of organisms to study to sort of get at the overall health of our planet. And of course, birds are incredible bioindicators. So when we see bird populations changing in space and time, we know that something's either going wrong or potentially going right. So what is eBird? Well, it's pretty simple concept with eBird. Every time you go out there birding, whether you're walking at Laguna Grande or taking a stroll down here on the beach, you can fire up the eBird mobile app, and basically it records the track that you're walking on, and your only job is to see and identify birds on that route and then to try to count each species as you go. A lot of people get nervous about counting. We have a lot of resources online at eBird to help you learn how to count birds better. I would say that you don't have to count birds. You can just put an X to indicate that a bird was present. But your best estimate of a count is always better than an X because, the analysts that use these data, they understand that this is kind of a messy process. Different people have different abilities in the field. We understand that, and we actually model all of that in the background, so we can use your data in the best possible way. So we can actually see that birders get better over time as they interact with eBird. Their counts get more accurate, these kinds of things. We can also see as birders age, their accuracy actually goes down. So that's what my line's starting to do now. It's starting to go the other direction. So eBird, you can think of eBird as the sort of app to record the birds that you're seeing in the field. And when you do that, it does all kinds of cool stuff behind the scenes in the database to make your birding history available to you. So you go to the website, you can see your life list, you can see all of your sort of birding history gathered there just by submitting those checklists over and over again. Merlin is the tool to help you identify the birds that you see in the field. Merlin's a free bird guide, works everywhere in the world. You can fire it up offline. It works great. So you basically download packs if you're going to travel to Thailand and you don't think you're going to have a good connection or something like that. Download the bird pack for Thailand. Everything works seamlessly offline. eBird works the same way. Merlin is operating at a scale that's much, much bigger than eBird. You can think of Merlin as sort of the front door to birding and birds for anybody anywhere on the planet. So you don't have to have a deep interest in birds to get a lot out of Merlin. This has been the game-changing feature, as Amanda said, this sound ID feature. So basically, you can sit on your patio with a cup of coffee and fire up Sound ID, listen to the birds around you, and Merlin is going to tell you what's singing and highlight those things in real time as the birds are singing. And it does this through a really interesting combination of computer vision and machine learning. So there are analysts and computer scientists at the lab who have pioneered this technology over the last 10 years, starting with photos. So when you submit a checklist to eBird, you can submit your photos. And then we have a community of people that take those photos and they draw these boxes around the birds and they train a computer vision model to understand what a Blackburnian warbler looks like. And it takes about 150 images of a bird for these models to, 150 annotated images, boxed images, for these models to work at a pretty high level. The big transformation, though, was when we realized, and when I say we, it wasn't me, it was computer scientists, particularly one named Grant Van Horn, who's a Californian. He pioneered this photo ID model and figured, well, I can just turn bird sound into pictures and create those spectrograms. So as this black-capped vireo sings, its song is being transformed into a visual of sound. And the way that Merlin Sound ID works now is that it takes those boxes of sound and every bird that's singing in a dawn chorus, we have annotators go in on all these recordings and draw boxes around the sounds, just like we did around the Blackburnian warbler in that previous picture. So again, it takes about 150 annotated recordings in order for us to add common yellowthroat to the model.
Is that just to validate
Yeah. Yeah, so when I say it's 150, that's 150 recordings that have been submitted to eBird that are stored in the Macaulay library that we've then had volunteer annotators go through and draw these boxes. So there's some of them in the room here, some volunteers who've done this. Paul's done a fair bit of this. It's not trivial work to go in and draw these boxes because you have to not only know what the common yellowthroat sounds like, but you have to know what every other sound on this file is, including, all the little calls of all the birds. So it does take somebody with a lot of expertise to do this. And that is the bottleneck currently to getting Sound ID working globally. And we're getting there. We're doing this through partners, right? So a lot of what I do on the day-to-day is build partnerships around the world for these kinds of tools. Right now, Merlin's doing about 1,800 species, still has about 8,000 species to go. And, you know, so that's a work in progress, but it's good work. One of the other things that we're doing that's really cool with our partners is we're translating and making these apps available in all kinds of different languages. This is Merlin in Zulu, which I think is the first bird app ever, bird guide ever available in this language. And you can see that our partners around the world recognize the barn swallow under a lot of different names, right? So all of these names are common names for barn swallow in different languages. So if you're birding in Russia, you know, barn swallow is a fairly cosmopolitan bird. If you're birding anywhere in the world, you need to have a bird guide that has these birds in the names that you know or in the names that you can look up and understand. So we work with our partners to make sure that all of these apps are translated.
Is the taxonomy the same across the board in the world?
It is, yeah. So we use a unified global taxonomy. So that's one thing that is constantly evolving. So annually there's a taxonomy update where we work with all of our partners and the taxonomic committees globally to keep up with the pace of science. And the pace of science is pretty fast right now when it comes to splitting, particularly island forms of birds in Indonesia, things like that. We're playing catch up in a lot of these regions with the taxonomy. So Birds of the World is you can think of this as the place where all of the outputs of eBird and all of the science outputs live. So you can go to Birds of the World and you can take a really deep dive into the life history of any bird species or bird family. The core of Birds of the World are these in-depth species monographs that Amanda showed. Some 75 articles that cover the various natural history aspects of the birds, all underpinned and referenced back to the original science publications. And again, this is not easy work. It's slow and tedious work, and we have a big network of global partners now that we're developing to help with this stuff. What underpins Birds of the World is the curated media that come in. So when you submit an eBird checklist and you make a sound recording or you take photos and you submit those photos, those become archived in the Macaulay Library. The Macaulay Library is a 100-year-old media archive that's now mainly digital at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. But we pick the best of those assets, those media assets, and we infuse those into the life history accounts of Birds of the World. So you can see there's some pretty high quality imagery. This is spoon-billed sandpiper, and we have our experts, the authors of these accounts, are taking the media and writing about what we're seeing in these pictures. You know, details of age, sex, subspecies, all that stuff that I would say science-minded birders like to dive deep into. There's photos, sounds, and video in there. And again, just to underscore, the Macaulay Library is like having a digital museum collection at your fingertips. So you can slice and dice the now millions and millions of assets, of photos, sounds, and videos any way you like. So if you want to know what a song sparrow in Monterey County looks like in August compared to one in Humboldt County in August, you can go open both of those things and look at literally hundreds of pictures, and they're rated, so you can sort the best stuff up to the top, and you can really start to compare, almost like you had museum trays at your fingertips to look at these resources. I'm currently working on a field guide, and this has been absolutely transformational for what we know about North American birds and being able to quickly just get at what does this thing look like in this place at this time. It's an incredible amount of information in here. So just to wrap up the quick presentation, I think this is the sort of core of the data engine that we're trying to build at the Lab of Ornithology. So we've got the observational data. These are just like a visual of gears. This big observational data gear coming in from eBird. Macaulay Library is dealing with the rich media stuff. Birds of the World is the life history data gear. There's actually a fourth data gear that's not on here, which is bioacoustics, right? So that's sounds basically coming in. And so that's kind of the landscape that we're gonna talk about tonight. So ask me anything about any of those 4 projects, and I'd be happy to answer.
Just very generally, could you give us a very rough idea of the number of people involved in this, mainly on one end from full-time staff all the way out to contributors?
Yeah, so I don't know if y'all heard that question. The question was how many people are involved in this from the staff all the way out to the contributors. The staff at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology right now is hovering around 300 people. The number of people that work on this set of projects is probably about 75. Most of, I'd say 60% of the team is based in Ithaca, New York, and the other 40% of the team is scattered to all corners of the world. We have a lot of engineering capacity behind these tools. As you might imagine, we're trying to stand up big databases 24/7, all these apps, you know, we have to keep things up and running. So it costs a lot in technical capacity to run this stuff. And then there's the communications, marketing, outreach, all that stuff that happens at the lab. There's a lot of stuff that goes on at the Cornell lab that's not this too. So this is just one subset of things that we do. In terms of participants, there's probably about 1.5 million people using eBird, you know, to submit complete checklists of birds. Merlin has about 30 million downloads now, which is not trivial. The Merlin audience is bigger than the New York Times. I don't know if you saw on that slide. It's the #1 reference app. Every time May rolls around and people want to know what bird's singing, it bumps up above, you know, all the, even the Bible app, you know, and all that stuff. Merlin, you know, can jump above that briefly. Birds of the World is a little bit trickier. We have about 15 million people using Birds of the World for an access point for information. We have about 4,000 volunteer authors plugging information into Birds of the World. The data quality gear that sits behind eBird. So as Amanda was saying, there's a lot of work that goes into keeping the data quality high behind eBird. Our reviewers for Monterey County, there are 3 of them. They're not in this room. It's because they know all this. But there's about 3,500 people who volunteer their time to keep the data quality high at eBird. So yeah, it's a big endeavor. We have about 200 global partners that range from, you know, small scale NGOs all the way up to government agencies. Just depends on sort of what they're doing and where. So yeah, it's a big enterprise of teams to manage. Yeah.
I was curious about the quality control aspect. So I'm very aware about garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
I love Merlin, use it all the time. I never use eBird because it's like, I don't know enough what I'm doing here, or just making data. There's like 20 of those birds. I saw one of them. It's like, oh, there's only one. Yeah. Can you do more harm than good sometimes if you're submitting a checklist? Can you read bad data?
I think the answer is yes.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
But you'd have to try really hard. Because if you are the kind of person who's going to go out there and just outright make stuff up, you can do some harm if you put those data into eBird. And we have seen surprisingly very few cases of that, but it's not zero, right? the idea of sort of nefarious sort of trying to put in fake data, it's very, very rare. So apart from that, you can't really do any harm by submitting even a single, one checklist with one bird on it is fine. If that's like, if you're in your backyard and you see a golden crowned sparrow come to your feeder, you want to record that, you can't harm anything by plotting your yard on the map and recording that. It doesn't need to be a complete checklist. You don't need to provide a count, right? That's your most basic bit of information that you can provide is, I saw this bird at this place and time. Those are the things that make up the most rudimentary checklist. And we do it all the time, even birders who are keen and use eBird all the time. You know, if I see a golden eagle fly over Carmel Valley Road on my way home, I put that in. Even though it's what we call an incidental observation, it's still a record of that bird in space and time that's useful for something. So that sort of scales from there all the way up to, I'm sitting in my yard for 15 minutes and I'm going to try to observe every bird that I can. So all of the sparrows, and I'm going to put counts in to the best of my ability. That last sentence, to the best of my ability, is really, really critical because we know what your ability is after we look at your data, because behind the scenes we use this calibration index that, for lack of a better term, we call it the species accumulation curve. So we look at thousands of these trajectories in a region and we say, okay, well, if you spend 15 minutes birding in Monterey County in this area, your species accumulation curve, that means how many species did you see in those 15 minutes, should be this. If you're an expert, those curves look different because you can detect everything by ear. So you're basically detecting many, many more birds. And we use those, what we call observer expertise scores, in the modeling process to weight your data. So if you're a Monterey birder and all you ever do is bird in your yard, you become an expert in your yard pretty quickly, and we know that. So we use your data to model here. But if you go to Thailand for a week, you won't know a single bird by ear, and you'll just be perplexed for like the first couple of days. So we know how to sort all that out behind the scenes in the modeling. It's a pretty advanced, process that we use to basically prune the data, before we make models with it.
But to kind of put it in a queue as needs to be examined further before you jump in. Because if you're just a novice and you don't have a record and you think you identified a bird, does it sit in the outside until it sounds like it's feasible?
So you can think of eBird as two levels of data. So there's the raw data that you all submit when you submit observations. And those raw data are what we see when let me see if I can pull it up here. When we go to explore, sorry, I can't really see that. Oh, that's science. Sorry, I'm just going to move this a little bit so I can see. All right. I don't think I'm connected.
Can we plug this laptop in? What do you need? Oh, your phone.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. It worked. Yeah, this is dragging. It's probably because it's going through my phone.
Oh, gotcha.
But anyway, if you go to species maps, you're looking at essentially the raw eBird data on these maps. And when I say the raw eBird data, it's still not unfiltered, right? So every region, in the case of Monterey County, we have 9 filter regions so you can think of it as like a grid that sits behind Monterey County. So when you plot a checklist, there's a species list and counts for all of the date windows for every species that give you a checklist of birds that's most likely on this date and at this location. So if it's a common bird like a golden crowned sparrow, that filter limit might be set to something like 10. You know, you could report 10 golden crowned sparrows before the filter gets tripped. Once that filter gets tripped, you get a notification in the field that says, this is a high count. Can you provide some documentation? This is a rare bird in this region. So you're being prompted in the field while you're seeing the birds to know this is unusual. So if you proceed at that point, which I would assume that you would if you're really seeing that bird, then that record goes into a holding tank, and that's where our reviewers communicate with you. They evaluate your the information you've provided, so your description, your photos. A lot of times it's just a, yeah, that's that bird, you know, that's fine. They put the data through. The reviewer's job is essentially to decide whether that flagged record goes into the science data set, not whether you actually saw the bird or not, right? So this is another really important thing about eBird that's quite important. Your list is your list. So if you say, I'm really 100% sure I saw that harpy eagle fly over out here, and you want to keep that eagle on your Monterey County list, that list is your list. It's not up to anybody else but you to decide who's on that list. But the reviewers will decide if the general public gets to see that record and if that record goes into the science data set. And most birders want their lists to be accurate, and this whole thing is built on, you know, basically the trust economy, if you will. You know, people, you're only lying to yourself if you make up birds, you know. So I don't know how rewarding that might be. Yeah.
Does birdcast do nothing for you? Does it just because they might not land, or?
So yeah, so as I said, there's a lot of different things happening at the lab. Birdcast is another project that looks at the birds aloft at night using NexRad weather radar networks. So they can actually measure and predict now the volume of migrating birds moving over the landscape in the spring and the fall. And there's some real world conservation implications for that. So with wind turbines, city lights at night, those kinds of things, they're doing these lights out campaigns when it's a huge sort of movement night over like Houston, for example. They'll actually dim the lights in the city of Houston so birds can pass by without flying into buildings and things like that. So birdcast is really cool. It's amazing at volume, but it's not there for telling us what species are up there yet, right? So it can tell us how many birds are aloft, but we don't know what species they are. So eBird and birdcast together give us some sense of that makeup, but they're not completely linked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, doesn't it list the birds that are kind of might be migrating at that time?
Yeah, it pulls those from eBird. Yeah, so that's just your, yeah, so that's just your most likely migrants that they show on the birdcast site based on eBird frequency data for whatever region you're looking at.
How many of these radar stations are there? They seem to cover the whole U.S.
Yeah, there's a, I wish I knew the number. It's hundreds probably. It doesn't work as well in the West as it does in the East because the radar beams interfere with topography, bounce off mountains, things like that. From the Great Plains East, though, you can see really impressive radar signatures for these birds. Did somebody else have their hand up?
Well, real quick, we do have some questions that were submitted ahead of time in our little Sanderling newsletter, which hopefully you all subscribe and get every month. We had a little link to submit questions for Brian tonight. So just real quick, I was going to read one here asking, how do you upload pictures when you're in the field? Or am I missing something? It seems you might be able to do that instead of waiting until you get home. Is that feature there yet in the eBird mobile app?
Yes and no. That's a tough one. I mean, it's really hard to get a good picture of a bird with an iPhone, right? So most bird photographers use a digital SLR or a mirrorless camera They take their bird pictures, they go home, they process those pictures on the computer until they're happy with the way they look. Then they put them in the eBird checklist, right? It's really hard to do that on a phone. So that's why we haven't really prioritized direct upload of, you know, your photo reel into eBird from the device. Now, there is a trick. If you submit your checklist on eBird mobile and you go to the submitted button and you open that list and click the add media link, you can then pull photos from your photo reel on your phone. And so right now we're collecting also habitat photos and what we call experience photos. So this is like who you were birding with and those kinds of things. That use case is a lot more appropriate for the phone and having sort of direct upload from the phone. But for bird imagery, most times photographers want to do a little processing before they put the photos in. Yeah.
I'm curious about whether the data from another corner lab in the Peter Watch, does that go into eBird?
Yes and no. Behind the scenes, it's all in the same database.
So
But
if I say, yes, this is my Peter Watch data for today, and then I also did an eBird checklist,
those would be different only because Feeder Watch has a very specific protocol that's different from eBird's checklist protocol. So eBird's, as I said, the basic minimum checklist is specific date, location, and at least one species, right? Well, that's not true. You could have 0 species. We have a lot of 0 species checklists for, like, I went owling and I'm standing somewhere for 5 minutes hearing nothing, which is pretty much what happens every time I go owling. So I get 0 checklist, 0 birds on that checklist, but I submit the checklist because negative data are important too. Feeder Watch uses, as far as I'm aware, a 3-day long sampling event. So they, 2-day, so something like that. So it's a little bit there. The way they collect data is for a very specific purpose. It's different from what we do with eBird, but it's all pulled into the same backend database. And both data sets are openly available for research. But if you submit a Feeder Watch checklist, it doesn't show up in eBird, you know?
No, but it does end up in the database somewhere that isn't just Peter Watch.
It ends up in, the lab's sort of what we call the eBird database, but it contains data from many projects. And then, so there's Nest Watch, there's Feeder Watch, there's multiple different citizen science projects that are more targeted that all share the same back end to some degree. But eBird you can think of as kind of the umbrella database and the umbrella project that makes it easiest for someone to submit meaningful data. You know, I think these other projects have more targeted data collection protocols to answer very specific questions. So a general truth is that the more specific your question, the more challenging your protocol, the smaller your audience is going to be. Your participants are just going to start going like this as you make things harder and harder. So eBird was designed to be easy, low bar to entry for people, and hopefully, you know, they improve over time and they start to understand things like why it's important to do a complete checklist of birds, why it's important to try to count birds, those things. You know, over time they get better and better, and we can do more and more with each person's data from an analysis point of view.
Yeah, I think Carol had a question, and then I'll do one more from online.
I was interested in, I really like the habitat and the new habitat entry. What I put in there, I found a dead Virginia rail at a place that I went back and put it in habitat, but it was never reported in that area anytime in that area or anytime in that year. So I didn't know, I put it in there because I thought it might be interesting to someone because they'd say Virginia rails haven't been there before. So I don't know if that's something that is useful to put in if you found something deceased.
Yeah.
It's not a real
So
real entry.
The official answer on that is don't put in dead birds, because we don't know the provenance of that dead bird. We don't know if a cat dragged it there or whatever. My unofficial answer is if you want that dead bird on your eBird list, go ahead and put it in.
It's not actually in the
Yeah.
list. But
Oh,
it's
so
habitat.
there have been some cases of this where I've broken the rules. One was we found a dead thick-billed murre on Asilomar Beach in August.
That's
And the
rare.
thing was like pristine, just washed up, dead thick-billed murre. I don't, there was maybe one other county record. So I was like, well, I'm gonna put this in eBird. So we put that in under a Monterey Bay historic bird records account so that it didn't look like I saw the bird. But yeah, we fudged it a little bit to get that one in. So we do make exceptions for some of those more notable records.
Does that apply to I'm not a member of Beachcombers, but in their
No.
their introduction, the day measure and document dead birds on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Do those from Beachcombers, from their history go into the?
No, they don't. Those are a separate database. Again, that's a separate project. Beachcombers they've been doing their own thing for decades. Doing a beach cast bird survey, a very specific way. Again, I think some of the notable stuff might sneak in from time to time, but not every single common murre that they find dead on the beach. There's a lot of them. So.
Wouldn't it be helpful to know because that's the end life and the final?
Yeah, and that's why they do that.
It didn't wash from Tahiti or what.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I should say is that eBird is one database that's collecting observational data on birds. There's a lot of other databases out there that are also accessible. If someone has a specific question about bird mortality, they could look at all the beach-cast bird survey data for the entire West Coast. They don't have to come to eBird for that. They could get it from those various projects. So, the lab is frequently perceived as a group that wants to try to take all the data and control all the data. And we don't want to do that. We want to try to do what we're good at. And we want to try to let other groups, do what they're good at and what they're interested in. And if groups come to us and say, we'd really like to figure out how to get these data in eBird, we're more than happy to work with those groups to do that. But we wouldn't try to, to fit a square peg in a round hole for that, for that kind of thing.
That's my experience with bird watching is birds watch up on the beach.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, no, they do.
I'm not much of a bird watcher.
Yeah.
But there they are.
Yep.
And also I was going to ask you that question, does eBird have anything about bird skeletal anatomy?
No, it doesn't have anything about skeletal anatomy, but there's some of that in Birds of the World. And there's a great book that's called The Unfeathered Bird. Yeah, that's the best resource for that.
Yeah.
Did you have?
Yeah, there's a second question that was submitted earlier. This person is saying that often when I'm using eBird, it stops before I stop. This might be related to like the tracks. But I cannot add additional travel time to it. What do I do? As I like to see the trail that I walked for that particular eBird list. And I'm not sure if this is a user error thing, because it seems like the track will only stop when you stop it. It should say stop track. So maybe just explain the tracking function there. Maybe.
So on eBird Mobile, you can set it up to record your track as you're walking. And about 98% of people...
Can I plug my laptop back in? I can show people.
Yeah. 98% of people have their track enabled on mobile. And basically the way it works is it's just like Strava or any exercise app. Your watch, your iPhone's tracking you all the time anyway. So we're just showing you where you walked as you birded on a map. And that is actually really important from an analysis standpoint, because we understand then, where you actually looked at birds. So this is
Medowski State Beach on.
So you can see here that this person's track, they birded the sort of pond area, but they didn't walk the beach. So if this checklist doesn't have snowy plovers on it, We know why, because person wasn't on the beach.
Yep.
So you might think, man, that's a pretty detailed level of analysis, but the analysts are now using the tracks as the spatial information for analysis, because it's so much better than just some vague representation of this site. So we're looking at that map, and using spectral imagery to understand what the habitats are, and they break down the habitats into various components, associate the birds with those habitats, and then create the models.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe go to the status and trends science output.
Mm-hmm. We could search for a snowy plover.
Yeah, do something that's not a coastal bird.
Oh, dang it. Okay, yeah.
Snowy plover's fine.
I'll do varied thrush. I don't know why that's popping in.
Sure.
All this is under the science.
Yeah.
Well, status and trends, I think, is under its own website. I don't think
It's under eBird.
It is under
It's under
science? Okay.
science. Yeah. So this is, remember I was saying there's 2 layers of eBird data. One is the raw data. This is when your raw data gets selected to become part of the status and trends modeling workflow. So if you've done a complete checklist of birds with counts and you have your track and your duration and all that stuff, your checklist is going to make the cut for this science output. And these science outputs now are what we're really working with, say, the federal government, state agencies and all that. This is the stuff they're interested in. They're not really interested in the raw data for all the reasons, one asked about data quality. But the modeling process that goes into making this surface is very, very rigorous and published in all kinds of peer-reviewed paper and updated, annually. So these are essentially, what you're looking at here is a relative abundance surface for varied thrush. And you can see the non-breeding season is in blue. Every one of these 3-kilometer grids gets a value in this model. If you go to the darker blue, that's darker, or the darker is higher relative abundance in the non-breeding season. So that number there, 1.31, that's the predicted number of varied thrushes that one could expect to see on a 1-kilometer walk in that grid square at the appropriate time of day to see a varied thrush. So when their detectability is highest. So we can generate this now. Go to
trends?
No, weekly.
Oh, okay.
And scroll out.
Mm-hmm.
And then hit the play button.
Oh yeah, this is fun. Scroll much
So
further
when
up.
we have these kinds of models, we can now watch this population of varied thrushes breed and then migrate south. And we can see sort of where the densest parts, again, we're looking at relative abundance here. And you can imagine if you're a conservation planner, you want to know what birds are on my property, all these questions, when are they there? How much of the bird's population am I responsible for protecting? Those kinds of things. We can answer that now with all these kinds of surfaces. And click trends. I don't know if so varied thrush does have trends. So
I don't
scroll.
know if we're going to be in Monterey, really.
No, they don't.
Oh, it's only breeding season. Yeah.
So trends defaults to the breeding season because that's the most logical thing to look at. This is zoom out a little bit. So these trends are calculated now weekly for, sorry, not weekly. They're calculated for 27-kilometer grids across this time zone. So this is 10 years. And you can see this is really typical of a trend. Until eBird came along, trends used to be either the bird was going down or it was going up. But now we can see a lot more resolution on these trends. And what we're finding is that 95% of North American birds have this kind of mixed pattern that, the populations are increasing in some areas and decreasing in others. Go to the little drop down by the sign name at the top and pick some other species like
acorn woodpecker. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
I was looking at them
Acorn woodpecker
recently.
might be
They're, I
good.
think, doing pretty good if I remember, which was amazing. I was like,
So
yeah, look at
acorn
them.
woodpecker looks like
Ooh.
it's doing mostly
Yeah.
okay. But look at this in the San Gabriels.
Yeah, what's going on there?
So why, and this is the thing we're wrestling with now at the lab. We can see what's happening with bird populations in unprecedented resolution thanks to you're all contributing these data. But the thing that we don't know is why there's this hot spot of decline for acorn woodpecker here versus somewhere else where it looks like it's doing just fine.
Yeah, around
You know,
here.
the Santa Lucia is even, it's even variable there in Big Sur.
Mhm.
So the thing that we have to do is figure out what data we need to collect to start getting at the drivers of these declines at the same spatial and temporal scale that we can see these trends. And that's really, really hard thing to do because what you need is demography and population data on these birds. So you need to know about births, deaths, and movements. And that's a different level of data that you can only get from banding birds, having birds in your hand, mark recapture type studies. And those studies don't happen at this scale. Those studies happen at really small scales. So it's hard to scale that up. So that's what we're sort of wrestling with now is how do we scale up demography data in a different way? Like, can we get some measure of demography and population data without actually having to capture birds? I don't know the answer to that. That's kind of what we're wrestling with at the moment.
Did you ever overlay wildfire maps?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's a project that's been worked on by a researcher named Andrew Stillman at the lab. Yeah, so he's actually working with U.S. Forest Service to look at how bird populations respond to their various burn regimes. And what they're finding is that for birds like olive-sided flycatcher, which respond to fire, they love tall burnt snags. Their response is not even in space and time, so it does change depending on the type of fire, even where it is within the bird's range. So it's interesting. One thing we're learning about birds is that it's complicated. Everything that we thought was, even migration, right? They move south in the fall and north in the spring. Well, maybe, but maybe not. So we're seeing a whole. All this stuff is just, it's amazing where we are, but we actually have more questions than we had before. We know now what we don't know, and that's a lot.
I was going to point out just real quick the downloads button right here. Like Brian said, a lot of this information is accessible. So yeah, any researcher, if any of you are like really savvy about overlaying wildfire maps with eBird data, you can download this stuff. It's freely available.
Go to Swainson's thrush. Swainson's thrush is an interesting one. So this one is a bird that, and zoom out to the full. Yeah, here we go. So this is an interesting one because there are two populations of Swainson's thrushes, russet-backed ones in the west and olive-backed ones that breed in the boreal forest. And what you can see here pretty clearly is that the olive-backed birds are doing really bad, and the russet-backed birds are all in blue for the most part. There's a mix here. But this is probably a species level difference that you're seeing. So there's been a lot of talk about Swainson's thrush being at least 2 species. This kind of dipole in the trend is pretty interesting because it suggests that something is probably happening with these birds on the winter grounds. They probably winter in 2 different areas where the olive-backed birds go all the way to South America and these russet-backed birds go to Central America.
So if we saw abundance, does it include? Yeah, here we go. So for abundance, you can see where the guys who go all the way to South America, it shows them for their breeding season.
That's winter.
Way down here.
Winter.
I'm sorry, winter season.
Yeah.
Yes, opposite of the breeding season.
Yeah, so click weekly and hit play on that. It's pretty cool animation.
Zoom out. Oh no, out of control. Here we go. Okay, where's our start? They're gonna go.
Yeah, you have to zoom out a little.
Whoa.
But you can even see the migration see all the russet-backed birds come across the Gulf of Mexico,
Oh, was
all the
that
way
like
down here.
let's see it
I'm
again.
sorry, the olive-backed birds and the russet-backed
Oh, there we
ones
go.
basically go from there to our west coast. So we're seeing sort of biological signal in some of these outputs that are going to be advancing the sort of systematics and taxonomy of birds as well. You would never be able to see this kind of thing, before eBird.
Oh, I see. That's what that is.
Is it not working?
No, I was pushing the seconds button. That's a new feature I just discovered. You can change how fast it's going right here. You can make it go in 0.5 seconds, or you make it go much faster.
Maybe
so.
just let it play once.
I think it did initially. I was trying to see where
Yeah.
they split the east and the west population.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, this modeled data is sort of what we're after for every bird on the planet. These models are super data hungry. So somebody asked me earlier, it was Cheryl, said, well, why should I put data in from my backyard over and over again? It's because if we're going to do weekly models of abundance, we need measures of birds over and over again. And it might seem repetitive or like it's not really helpful, but it really is. And if you do that every day, you'll actually see cool changes in your yard, subtle things. It's really hard for us to perceive unless we're doing that day after day, some of the changes, some of the obvious stuff like when birds arrive and depart. Departure is actually a lot harder than arrival. When did that last white-crowned sparrow leave your yard? I don't know. I thought
the same bird shows up every day.
No, it is.
But I mean, if you're just doing counts and you don't know its name.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter if it's the same individual, but you will get to know the same individuals. If you do birds in your yard every day, you're like, yep, there's that black phoebe again. That's the same spot. And then you'll be surprised one day when it's gone 3 years later, Yeah. In my yard in Carmel Valley, I have a northern mockingbird that shows up in the late 20s of September, just shows up out of nowhere, Mockingbird, we don't really think of it as migrating, but this one comes from somewhere, spends the whole winter and then leaves. There's all kinds of little things like that.
I've got a quick question, actually. How does Merlin decide your bird of the day? Those are weird to me. They show up kind of crazy and random.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know the answer to that question. That feature, I think it just pulls a random bird from the likely list. They use some
haven't seen in a while.
They use some threshold of likelihood at a date and location and give you a bird of the day, basically. It's just a fun thing to kind of
motivate you.
Yeah, get people to A, open the Merlin app every day, and B, go try to see that bird of the day.
I think it's
they
unique.
Do. Everybody has their own.
I'll see what my bird of the day was today, which I didn't see.
It's the other way around. eBird data feed everything that Merlin does.
If you're a novice and you don't know anything about it, which one would you pick just to get started?
Merlin.
Yeah, this one's great.
Merlin is the wide angle open door to birding, right? If I would argue every single person on this planet has probably had the question at one point or other in their life, what bird is that? It's a pretty hard thing to ignore birds your entire life. At some point, you probably thought, man, what is that thing? That's cool, Yeah.
That's where you use iNaturalist.
Yeah.
Another question.
So that's what Merlin's designed for. And if you get into Merlin and you start using it, then you can matriculate up to eBird. Because coming into eBird as a pure novice it's a pretty high learning curve, right? You're like, whoa, what is this checklist that they're giving me? And I messed up this bird, and a reviewer's sending me a note about it. It's like, I didn't sign up for this,
It's homework now. Yeah.
So it can be a little bit of a stiff learning curve for eBird. So I'd say start with Merlin if you're trying to just get into birds, get familiar with what's around you, and then start recording the stuff that you see in eBird.
Mm-hmm. We've got one more question at the back of the room. Oh, and then we'll go back to Karen. Yeah,
so
back here.
Built this incredible framework, software framework. As you go to conferences, is there any interest from other groups to create something like eFish or eBird
Oh, yeah.
that would use this incredible software that you built by just taking the framework and converting it? That's one question. The second question is, your funding susceptible to the madness?
Uh-oh.
I'll take the first one. They're both good questions. I'll answer both of them. Birds are really special in a number of ways for the magic that needs to all come together, this alchemy that makes eBird work. As I said, birds are everywhere on the landscape. They're big and colorful and easily identified. There's a whole bunch of people interested in them, and they're incredible. We know a lot about them. There's field guides to birds all over the world. Information is readily accessible about identifying birds, and they are incredible indicators of ecosystem health. All of those things come together to make birds the perfect set of organisms for this kind of model. I'd argue that it's really hard to extend that to just about any other group. It's been tried. There is a butterfly thing, there's a dragonfly thing, there's coral reef fishes for divers. So this idea of citizen science and recording observational data on organisms is being